Rolling along on a Monday, a lot of football to get into. Johnny Mac's here. Football at 4 is the place to be every day at this time. We talk NFL. All guests appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline, just like Johnny Mac here on the Sports Bash. And, of course, we look at the NFL, the Eagles, and everything in between. And there's a lot out there. And this one's kind of interesting to start things off as we teased on the other side. John, the Jacksonville Jaguars have made their decision at quarterback. They have an MVP of the Super Bowl on their roster, and yet they decide not good enough for us. They're going to go Gardner Minshew, which means Nick Foles is on the trade market. We know the Eagles need a backup quarterback. How about our old friend Nick Foles?
The idiots are out today.
Don't include me. Don't include me.
No, but they're already out. They're already asking me. Nick Foles, you can't pay a backup. We've been through this. You cannot pay a backup quarterback with Nick Foles.
Yeah, but you have Howie Roseman. You can figure out a way to restructure. He's the best.
If Nick wanted to restructure and give up tens of millions of dollars, perhaps that would be an opportunity there. But the second part is, obviously, you don't want that specter looming over Carson Wentz. And you do have, again, it's a small minority, same minority that thinks Shake Milton is a top 5 player in Sixers history. It's the same minority, and it's very small, but they think Nick Foles is better, and you create that dynamic. You don't want it in your locker room. You don't want it near the face of the franchise. So the answer, emphatic no.
Emphatic no. I didn't think so. But what do you think the Jacksonville Jaguars are thinking? Why are they making the decision? I mean, I know Nick got hurt. Minshew came in, played okay. But how did they already give up on Nick Foles?
Because he's not very good. I mean, people, we predicted this. It wasn't going to work out very well for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They overpaid a mediocre quarterback who got hot at the right time and created this legend in one football crazy city. Doesn't make him a good quarterback. It never did. He's below average. He started 4 games. The interesting part of the Wentz-Foles dynamic here was the thought process that Carson was injury-prone, and he's had some injuries, obviously. But the fact that Nick Foles isn't injury-prone is ludicrous. He never finishes. He played 4 games for Jacksonville, and he lost all 4. And Minshew, who, I kind of chuckle at them as well that they want to move forward with him as their starting quarterback because he's not the answer either. But he won 6 games. So, one guy was 0-4, and you're overpaying him to a ludicrous degree. The other guy's at least cost-effective. You stink either way.
So, Nick Foles, by the way, for those of you just joining us, the Jaguars have announced that they are going to go with Minshew, which means Foles is on the trade deadline. And, by the way, the contract for Nick Foles, $15 million this year. 14.8 the following year, and in 2022, you can get the MVP of the Super Bowl for only $20 million.
Well, if he was a top-tier starting quarterback, those numbers would be nice, actually, but he's not, and they're not nice for a backup quarterback. So
what happens here? What happens here? Does Foles end up as the backup in Jacksonville? They can't move him. Do they cut him? That's a lot of dead money. Does somebody trade for him? Because this is a bad year to be on the trade market for a quarterback because there's a lot of options in free agency. So what does happen to Nick Foles?
Yeah, there's a lot of options in free agency. There's a lot of options in the draft as well, and there's not enough chairs, so to speak, at the quarterback position for everybody to have a starting job. So you think about it, there's always desperation. There's always injuries. You never know what's going to happen, and something could pop up. Some people have already speculated if things don't work out for Indianapolis. You know how that works because Frank Reich is there. Mike Groh is there. Maybe that could be a spot. Chicago is obviously looking for a situation, a Tannehill Mariota situation where the backup quarterback will probably take the job from Mitchell Trubisky, so they need to bring in a veteran. And Matt Nagy had him in Kansas City. John DeFilippo's now there. Bill Lazor's now there. He had him in Philadelphia. So you look for those familiarity parts of it, and maybe somebody gets desperate. But, boy, I don't know who would want to trade for that contract unless you want to make him the starting quarterback. And I don't see anybody who would want to make him a starting quarterback.
Nope, the Eagles included. If they were to do something, it would be a backup, and he would have to take a significant pay cut, and that's probably not going to happen because, quite frankly, you would have to trade for him, right? I mean, that's the only way the Eagles, unless Jacksonville released him.
Yeah, and that would be, from their standpoint, that would be significant dead cap money. But even if they did release him, let's say in a best-case world, best-case scenario, they did release him, you can negotiate a backup deal for him, and he would obviously fit very well into this situation as a backup quarterback. But again, you don't want that around Carson Wentz. You don't want that nonsense around Carson Wentz. His first bad game, you're going to have these whatever you want to call them. I don't want to call them bad names, but call them what you want, and they're going to be calling.
How about a Yahoo? How about a Yahoo?
Yahoo. Rube. How about Rube? Yeah, I mean, they're going to be calling for him to be the starting quarterback, and nobody wants that in Philadelphia. Nobody. Well, nobody in the Eagles organization.
Just the Yahoos.
There's a lot of Yahoos.
There's too many Yahoos. But they're not going to change the thought process of the Eagles organization. I can tell you that.
Maybe trade Alshon Jeffery straight up for him.
There you go. Two disgruntled performers.
Yeah, save a few bucks.
I like your thought. You're not paying a backup quarterback $14 million.
Oh,
I mean,
by the way, for the record, I want the record to be known. I am not advocating to try to get Nick Foles back here. I've been saying for years that he can't play, and I still believe that he can't play.
Well, he's a good backup quarterback.
Yes, he's a good backup quarterback, but everything you're saying is right, that you can't have him around here. It's too much money. I was half joking in the back and forth, but he is on the trade block, and I find it to be a very interesting scenario that here's another team that he has gone to, and anywhere other than Philly, John, he has been a failure.
Yeah, he has, and it's stunning that Jacksonville made the mistake. We talked about it a lot. I said somebody was going to make a mistake and pay him a lot of money because of a two-game run, essentially. And it really was a two-game run because if you go back to the Super Bowl season, you think about the Atlanta playoff game, he did not play well in that. He did not play well at the end of the regular season after Carson Wentz went down. In fact, he played poorly, and then he got hot at the exact right time and was lights out against Minnesota. He was lights out in the Super Bowl against New England. And I've always compared it to Vinnie Johnson, the street shooter in the NBA, the old microwave. When he gets hot, it's great, but the consistency is not going to be there. And I always made that comparison between who do you want, Vinnie Johnson or Isaiah Thomas? Well, obviously you want Isaiah Thomas. But on those singular days where Vinny got hot, you'd want Vinnie Johnson. Problem is, they're few and far between.
Right. You want Shake Milton or you want Ben Simmons? Don't answer that out there.
Don't answer that.
It's too soon. It's too soon, man.
John, what do you make of, it seems that this Alshon Jeffery stuff won't go away. More stuff, someone had to confront him. It got to the point where they had to be separated. We always try to ask in these instances, whose side does this benefit? Who would leak that kind of information out? It's a head-scratching one for me to try to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, from the benefit, I don't know if either side benefits, to be honest. I mean, it's pretty clear that the Eagles don't want him around. And I don't even know if it's fair because, I mean, people have gone to this conclusion that he leaked the information to Josina Anderson. There is absolutely no proof of that. They're going on a prior relationship, the fact that they've talked before, and the fact that Howard Eskin said it, which is not exactly the most reputable source in the world. I have no idea if he said it. I said at the time, I will say, the comments themselves made no sense coming from a receiver, because if you think about the classic diva wide receiver, well, what do they want? They always want the ball. And those comments, and I think that's the second part, a lot of people forget what those comments were. So we got to check it down. We got to be more simplified on offense. It's too complicated. Not give me the football. What wide receiver says that? So it didn't make sense from that perspective. If he did say it, I don't know why he said it. But again, it's not that bad. But the Eagles don't want him for two reasons. One, the perception that he talks out of school. But more than that, and far more than that, 80-20, if you want to give it percentages, is the fact that they don't think he can play anymore. That is why they want him out more than the fact that he talked out of turn, if he did, to Josina Anderson. They think he can't play anymore. They saw the steep decline in speed, and then you have a serious foot injury, and the theory from there is, well, you're not going to gain speed coming off that kind of foot injury. So they think he's kind of done. He's kind of cooked as a player.
Right. And I feel like this story isn't going away, and, how he spoke, and it's just reports are still surfacing, and they're linking these reports to why the Eagles want to move on. It just doesn't make any sense to me. If you had to guess, John, what Howie Roseman is thinking and how he ideally wants to handle the situation. I know they want to move on from him, but do you think these reports that are still resurfacing, do you think that's impacting his decision-making? Because that's all that matters.
No, I don't think it's impacting his decision-making. His decision-making is already made, whether Alshon is going to be on this roster as sort of a stash as he recovers from his injury, or they cut him. The Eagles have already made the decision that they don't expect him to be a big part of this offense, either or. And from everybody in the league, I was texting. I mean, everybody in the league thinks the Eagles are going to move on, and bite the bullet once the new CBA is ratified. And then you have that post-June 1st designation back. At least that's the plan. We'll see if anything changes. But as of now, you don't have that post-June 1st designation. So all that $26 million of dead cap money would be on this year's cap. If the new CBA is ratified, you can split that up. It would have to be 16 this year, 10 next year, which is still bad, but it's not as bad. At least you can take the hit over 2 seasons.
So wide receiver is number one, plentiful in this draft, at least it's supposed to be. And then with the Alshon Jeffery stuff going on, how does J-Jaw and, Arcega-Whiteside and his position on this team factor into what the Eagles could be doing in the draft at wide receiver?
Well, he's going to be on the team because he's a second-round pick and it's only his second season. But he's got a lot to prove, obviously, and I don't think he'll go into off-season work as part of the offense and as a starting receiver, somebody they're going to count on. They're going to add multiple bodies at wide receiver, and the hope is that Deshaun Jackson is healthy, obviously. More likely than not, that first-round pick is likely to be a receiver. You're probably going to add another receiver, whether it's through free agency or another draft pick a little bit later because of the depth of the position. So you're going to see a whole new group at wide receiver. And the guys who are here, and you can put Greg Ward in that category as well, they're going to have to earn it. They're not going to be given anything. And the guys coming in theory, even though we don't know their names, they're probably going to be more talented.
All right, Johnny Mack is with us. Byron Jones, we talked a little bit about him the other day. There was some talk that the Eagles are going to be frontline but $17 million was a number that I heard thrown out there. I guess it was Adam Kaplan on the Inside the Birds podcast. I mean, $17 million makes it sound like, oof, you are really trying to throw money to fix a problem that you haven't been able to figure out how to fix. Is that a number that makes you kind of pause?
Yeah, I mentioned this Friday on the show. I do not like it. He's going to get anywhere from 15 to 17 million. The way it's going, because so many people are going to be in the hunt. Redskins, Giants, Eagles, Raiders, Broncos. Some say the Lions after if they trade Darius Slay. There's going to be a lot of people bidding for the services of Byron Jones. He's going to be the top-paid cornerback in the NFL. He's not the best cornerback in the NFL. So if that average annual value gets up to $17 million, and Adam's not the only one to throw that number out, because that's the number that's been thrown out by the agent, and that's the goal. That's the goal. And I always talk about in Philadelphia, we mentioned a little bit last week with Byron Maxwell, Nnamdi Asomugha. You get these high-profile cornerbacks, and the fans see that number, $17 million. Okay, he's the top-paid corner in the game, so he should be the top corner in the game. He's not. He's a good player. He's a heck of a lot better than what you had, but there's going to be expectations on him to be a superstar, and I would take pause if I were Byron Jones. I'd rather go play for the Raiders. I put that on Twitter. I know Eagles fans are not going to like that, but he's going to get a lot of you-know-what for that contract.
I just don't think, John, and this is just my opinion when assessing the corner position in the NFL in today's game, it's not valuable anymore. There's no such thing as a Deion Sanders. Like, tell anyone to name the top 5 corners in the league. They're not going to be able to do it. The league is set up for them to really to have a lower ceiling, I guess is my point. So I can't wrap my head around the Eagles potentially making that type of deal for him.
Well, a couple things. You're right in the fact what it is a fast-moving position. But if you ask NFL GMs, what are the most important positions? Obviously, quarterback is number one. Then it's edge rusher. The old cliche is, if you don't have the quarterback, you better get to the quarterback. So it goes quarterback, it goes edge rusher, and then if you're going to put 3, it would still be corner. It would still be corner in this league. Everybody tells you it would be corner. But what you bring up that is true is that position moves so quickly and it wears on you because of it's how difficult it is to play. The revolving door at the top of the cornerback position. A couple years ago, all pros in the NFC were Xavier Rhodes and Patrick Peterson. They stunk up the joint last year. I mean, they were awful. They were terrible, both of them. And that's how quickly it moves. But you need guys who can cover in this league. It's a passing league. The spread offenses are only going to increase with the new projected rules in the CBA. Things are going to get more simplified, and that means you got to point at the receiver and say, go cover that guy.
Yeah.
And you need guys who can cover, and the Eagles haven't had enough guys who can cover.
John, I want to ask you real quick. I know we've talked about that Peterson has said he would like to bring back Jason Peters. Now, Peters obviously is a free agent, and you would have to work on a deal. There's some reports that he would look at settle for a 1-year, $6 million contract that would have some incentives in it. But are you on the train that says the Eagles just don't trust Andre Dillard yet, and that's why they would consider bringing Peters back, as opposed to, hey, if Peters wants to play, we just really like Jason Peters and think he's a good guy to have around?
I'm on the train that it's more likely than not that Jason Peters will be back, and it doesn't have much to do with Andre Dillard. We talked about the coaching staff and certain members of the coaching staff, and Doug was overruled. I think Howie's getting overruled here. That's it. there are certain decisions and that are ownership decisions. Jeffrey Lurie has decided Jason Peters is an ownership decision. That is his decision. He's going to make it, and I think he's going to want Jason Peters back. I think Howie understands what needs to be done. I don't think he will be allowed to do what needs to be done. And don't get me wrong, and I've said this consistently, for next season, Jason Peters is still a better player than Andre Dillard. But there's more to it than that. And sometimes, and Jim Schwartz calls them startup costs, perfect example of this was Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders was awful at the beginning of last season. At the end of last season, he was great. And part of the reason why is because he got thrown into the deep end of the pool. He learned from his mistakes, and he got better and better with live repetitions. The same thing will happen with Andre Dillard whenever they pull the trigger. I think Howie knows they need to pull the trigger. I don't think he'll be allowed to pull the trigger.
All right, good stuff there. Obviously, we hit on that Nick Foles earlier and all through the Eagle stuff. A couple quick takes here that are happening that I'd like to get your take on. Last week, Ryan Pace reaffirmed Mitch Trubisky will open as the starter for the Bears in 2020. According today to The Athletic, the Bears have been in touch with the Bengals about acquiring Andy Dalton. Is that just to kind of babysit, or is that to push Trubisky for the job? It seems that a lot of dots connecting Dalton to Chicago.
No, they're going to try to do the same situation that Tennessee did last year when they brought in Ryan Tannehill. And they said to Mariota, you got one more shot, but the Leafs are small. And that's what Chicago is going to do. And whether it's Andy Dalton, whether it's Jameis Winston, whether it's Nick Foles, somebody like that, let's be honest, Mitchell Trubisky is going to stink up the joint for a month, and he's going to get benched, and whoever they sign or trade for is going to be the starting quarterback.
All right, we got a lot to get into with this crazy season just kind of getting underway. We'll do more Football at 4 tomorrow. We got the franchise tags coming up, and it looks like Jacksonville is going to have some interesting things there, Cincinnati as well. We will get into it all, Football at 4, and, of course, the Combine in the books, the trade, the draft season is here. We got it all on the Sports Bash. John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thank you, John.
All right, thank you, guys.
Yeah, man. John's back tomorrow with Football at 4. You can hear it every day, 4 o'clock on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN.